It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we talk about your Australian property market 7 days a week, right across 2025, which is well underway. You can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, also Apple Podcasts and Amazon. If this week was your first week back, well, we have gotten to our Friday, January the 24th, nearly into the weekend. Brisbane's property market, now that has officially joined the $1 million club, with the median house price soaring over $1 million and change. This is in the December quarter after an impressive $23,000 hike. Units have hit a record median of 632,000 and change, rising 11,000 over the same period, with an 18.1% annual rise in unit prices. Brisbane is set to shine as one of the 2025's top performing markets. Yeah, it just sort of picks up, doesn't it, from where it left off last year. And coming up next, once again, we are back into the summer series for 2024 from last year.
Listen to in-depth discussions with industry leaders on investing options, understanding different suburbs with insider perspectives and exclusive tips. You're listening to the Summer Series on the Real Estate Podcast.
What do you think about some of this alternative? I see it all the time where agents are doing this sort of wacky form of advertising a client's property. I personally don't think that that is such a great look. I think that properties, if they are presented beautifully without the clowning around, they're going to sell anyway.
I totally agree. Look, I think the way that agents now are pushing homes, let's use Instagram as the channel. Yes, they're doing, stories and reels. The videos that they're capturing are caught in the moment. They are purposefully meant to be lo-fi, so not super high quality, but that's because the channel Instagram itself lends itself better to more real, authentic content. But in saying that, from our stats and our data, when we're running advertising through Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, we are very quick to swipe or scroll to the next thing. We're very rarely are we watching a video from start to finish. It's very hard to capture people's attention these days. So that's why static images are working better than videos for real estate agents and for developers.
Yeah, I think maybe part of the problem for that will be the way in which the video content is presented. I think people just go for those static images. And I've mentioned this before, where a videographer has done a close-up of a plant or a downlight. You want these wides. Some of these videographers don't have wide lenses. It's pretty obvious they're being shot on a 50mm. Now, if you're having videography done, ask that question if you're selling your property. Does the videographer have a wide lens?
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer, but you're absolutely right. And I guess with the videographer, you really want to make sure that they're just focusing on the areas that will sell your property. So just your money shots, your key moments in your home. People don't need to see a downlight or the skirting or a plant. What they want to do is they want to be imagining themselves in your home. So show the areas that they can do that in. And that typically will always be your kitchen and entertaining area. They're the areas that you really want to be focusing on with your video and static imagery.
And Simon, you mentioned at the start, we were talking about realestate.com.au and Domain, pretty much market dominance around advertising. And you've done all sorts of tests and you're able to track it far more than your average Joe Blow. And he was saying that you're looking at different options in terms of how to shake it up a little bit in terms of that advertising budget. So what other areas in particular in 2024 are you finding some traction with?
Yeah, great question. REA and Domain, they have a place. There's no doubt that we as consumers use it, but the cost that they're charging for advertising is ludicrous in my mind for the results that you're actually getting. And so the alternatives that we've been testing have been your social media and your Google channels. Now, the reason why we do this and really predominantly we're focusing on Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram. The reality is majority of people are on Facebook and Instagram too much every day, in fact. Whereas REA or Domain, they're not on there really. And if they are, they're on there just doing a little bit of research. But what happens is when you're on those channels, you're flooded with other properties that look very similar pricing in the same area. And so I kind of liken it to the analogy that, you're in Woolies and you're looking for coffee and you're almost sport for choice. You don't know what to buy or look at.
Are you spending big bucks on ads that don't hit the right audience? Isn't it always about the right audience? You can land your message directly every day with our core audience. It's a powerful connection.
I've noticed at the end of 2023, the buyers were just being so disappointed if they missed out on homes. They were saying, we weren't given the opportunity, etc. So I thought I need to find a different platform to sell the properties, which makes it fairer for the buyers to actually know where their offer sits, etc. And they have the opportunity to amend the offer. So I started selling on the 1st of January, all my properties this year by the open platform, which has made a huge difference. And the buyers have loved it because it gives them full transparency and allows them to, if they've got that opportunity, increase their bid on the property they can. So that's been a huge game changer for me. And I wind the campaigns up within 10 days because the key thing with the buyers have said, Lisa, we want to know by this weekend if we've got the house or not, if we've got to go out and look for another property.
So when you say transparency, it gives them greater transparency. What are they doing differently to the other portals?
Okay, so with this platform, what it means is I can open up the ranking. So I do a normal home open, I do the normal campaign as normal, but when they want to put an offer in, I verify them, they upload ID, I check all their finance, and then it's sort of a bit like eBay. They can amend their bid on the property up until the closing. So it means that if they've got an extra 5 or 10,000 in the bank, they can put it forward. Whereas a lot of the buyers were saying to me, Lisa, fixed date sale, we're going in blind, we don't know. So I always put my from level where I think it will be and put a realistic from level, not too low, because I don't want to disappoint buyers. And then they can, as I said, see their ranking. And if they're ranked number 5, they can move their bid up, if they've got another 5,000 in the bank, and it gives them the best chance to put their best foot forward to get the property.
Yeah, look, I very much believe that. We are pretty competitively priced compared to Sydney. A lot of buyers, look, I'm selling probably 75 to 80% of our buyers are from the Sydney metro area. So a lot of people looking for that tree change, that lifestyle, slow down, and also that the changeover of perhaps drop a big mortgage in Sydney and come up here in a smaller one or no one at all, which is a very attractive option.
See, this prop track is really highlighting, turning a corner really. I mean, the days on market significantly lower. What are you seeing? What's the gut telling you in terms of the numbers and the transaction and what people are doing right now?
Look, I think it's really confidence. There's a lot more confidence in the market than there was with the interest rates, depending on who you listen to. But I kind of believe most buyers are thinking the worst is over and it's probably only going to get better from here. So they're jumping in before the inevitable price rises when interest rates kind of drop off a little. So I think that's a big driver. And then it's really about the lifestyle, the slowness of life. It's still, we're an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes from the Sydney CBD, but it feels like it's 3 or 4 hours away.
Every week, unravel the real estate market to empower your real estate knowledge.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. When we look at arrears data, as you say, the portion of home loans that are actually seeing late payments remains very, very low, but it is rising. Overall, the portion of home loans where payments are more than 90 days past due, or what we would call non-performing loans is sitting at just 1% of outstanding loans. That has generally risen since the start of interest rate rises. In June 2022, that arrears rate was just 0.76%. But I guess this just goes to show those kind of unquestionably strong standards in lending that the financial regulator, APRA, has been trying to achieve, where even when we go through this massive period of adjustment of rising interest rates and Australians being relatively indebted, that the arrears rate is still so contained at 1% overall.
Perth with 36 new $1 million suburbs. I mean, it's just phenomenal because it's not like it's one or two of these suburbs suddenly that find themselves in the $1 million range, but, 46 for Brisbane and 39 for Perth.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary, and it's definitely a reflection of the sharp increase in value that have been seen across cities like Brisbane and Perth over the past few years. It relates to things like strong migration trends coupled with undersupply. So what we were just talking about with the constraints in the construction space. And that's really seen, I think, the values pushing higher and higher. Not only that, but I think through the pandemic period, a lot of people started to look at the lifestyle appeal of Southeast Queensland more broadly.
2025, some of the economists are saying, hang on, there might be a bit of a boom in the market. We've got those rates and a few of them in the forecast for 2025 to come back. What are your thoughts? Here we go again. It's prediction time.
So what we're thinking is that the rate cutting cycle is probably going to start in the first quarter of next year. And that's just based on the consensus of the major bank forecasts for the cash rate. However, the expectation is that it's going to be a pretty shallow rate cutting cycle. Remember, we came from 0.1% in early 2022 to now 4.35%. The expectation is that by the end of next year, the cash rate could sit somewhere between 3.6% and 3.1%. So we're not going back to those historic COVID lows that induced the housing boom through 2021. Instead, I think this could provide maybe a modest uplift to demand. Affordability remains a massive constraint. We're not getting a lot of new dwelling supply from a construction perspective. And even where we have seen an increase in household incomes because of the introduction of the stage 3 tax cuts from July, we haven't really seen the market react to that. So that signals to me that the first rate cut might not do much for housing demand next year.
Could I see that the housing stock levels in Perth, they have been steadily rising since our last conversation. Where do you see them currently standing, and what are the impacts that you're seeing on the market as a result?
Yeah, so they're sitting at the moment a little bit below where they were last year, at the same time last year. So we've come up from the very low levels we were at, where there was sort of less than 2,000 houses to choose from on the entire market. Now there's about 3,000 or just over, which is great because we predominantly buy houses. There hasn't been a huge influx of units. There's still really good demand for units there. Transaction levels are still very high, sort of up around that 900 level per week, which is pretty high for Perth. So stock levels are up, but they're still historically low. They're still lower than this time last year, but it is nice for buyers and for us buyers agents to have a little bit more stock to choose from. And it has just sort of sucked a bit of that excessive FOMO type heat out of the market, which is good for buyers, at least in this window between now and when they drop rates, which could reinvigorate certain price points a little bit again. But there's a bit of a window there for buyers at the moment where it's still a seller's market, but it's not as overrun with buyers. We're dealing with maybe 15 or 20 through a home open and maybe 4 offers as opposed to 60 and 10 offers.
And are you seeing listings rise in specific locations more than in others?
We are, and we sort of predicted this, and part of the reason why we haven't bought in certain areas is because we see that the transient demand in areas like Rockingham, local government area, and Mandurah and Armidale, for example. These are areas that have been driven from the bottom up by investors, and they've had fantastic price growth. So congratulations to anyone who got in early in those markets. But the downside risk is that as that transient demand starts to profit take, because a lot of those investors are potentially not going to stay in those markets, you see listings rise, you see the locals in a position where they can't even afford where the price points have gotten to in terms of them buying or upgrading a home. And so I anticipated this, and we're starting to see it. Listings have risen 40% and 34% in the Rockingham and Mandurah LGAs, respectively. And they're two areas we've avoided for exactly this reason. And a lot of buyers agents have been buying in these areas over the last 24 months. I think probably going to suffer a little bit of reputational damage for just buying any old thing as opposed to taking their time to find the right asset long term for a client.
We are more than just a real estate podcast. Follow each week all of the main talking points and know your property.
And I guess that there must have been these situations when people bought at the top of the market, and if they were in that sort of 2021 cycle and they were looking at selling maybe 2 years later when there was a dip, that could have been a real sort of problem if you're going into a bridging loan and then you're just not able to sell your property. There would have been those cases out there.
Yes, and unfortunately, we have seen a few of those come through our office, and it's horrifying, to be honest. They do have shorter terms now, and a lot of the reason for that is because of that dip in the market. They do have quite high buffers on things for that reason, but it is scary kind of seeing those valuations drop, that's for sure.
Yes, and never a great look on the balance sheet if you end up getting caught up in that whole scenario. Now, let's just have a look at the recent home lending market, because there is this uplift at the moment in property prices, which is fair to say. So what are you currently seeing at the moment out there?
Yeah, so definitely in the Geelong market at the moment, there's a massive uptake we're finding of people purchasing. So a lot of purchases are coming through our team at the moment. And I think that's because people are becoming potentially more comfortable with the cost of living, letting the dust settle, understanding their numbers and being able to make some decisions. What I think will come from that, however, is although there might be plenty of choice at the moment for buyers, as rates move or, stock gets a little bit lower, then this is going to become pretty competitive, I think. So something to watch out for. I would say that we're preparing our buyers to ensure that they're pre-approved or definitely understand their borrowing capacity so that when they find something that they want or really like, then they're able to act quickly because it is getting pretty hot out there at the moment.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.